everyone. Welcome to Cherry the Geek TV. I'm Joe Vanourney. Today we are joined by Luke Lieberman. He is a writer, producer, and franchise steward in control of the Red Sonja franchise. And he's the producer of the new Red Sonja movie, which opens in theaters everywhere August 15th and will be available to stream on all digital platforms starting August 29th. Luke, welcome to Cherry the Geek TV.
How you doing?
Well, very well, very well. Let's start off, kind of give people a quick summary of if they're not familiar with the character of Red Sonja. Who is Red Sonja? What's her history? And what kind of world does she live in? Kind of set that up, set the premise up for Red Sonja.
I would say that the Hyborian Age, which is the world that she lives in, created that world was created by Robert E. Howard as part of kind of the Conan comics way back in the day. It's a little bit less Tolkien, a little more J.R.R. Martin, a little more Game of Thronesy with some H.P. Lovecraft thrown in. I think is kind of the best way to describe it. It's a very visceral, gritty. The magic is it's diabolical. It's not a pretty world. It's a hard world, and it's been hard on Sonia, and it's made her a hard woman. But that struggle is part of what defines her, I would say. In terms of the character, I think the reason, because this character has had a lot of stories told about her, and I think what keeps her compelling after all these years is that there's no artifice about her. Sonia just is. She's a sort of wild, tortured, free spirit that is unafraid of life and death.
So the character's been around for a long time. I remember back in the 70s when the Marvel Comics group was doing the Red Sonja comics. And then, of course, the 1985, there was the film with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Brigitte Nielsen was playing Red Sonja. So character's been around for a long time. How old were you when you first discovered the character of Red Sonja? And what about that world and that character appealed to you?
I was my father controlled Conan the Barbarian, so I was born into the world. I don't really think there was ever a time that I didn't know it. If you look behind that sword back there, that was a gift to Dad from Ed Pressman, John Milius, for helping to make that movie back then. So, the old Conan movie. So there was never. She's sort of like a member of the family to me. It's kind of like having a, really angry, cool older sister. So there's never really been a time. I know her sort of organically, I guess I would say.
So you control the rights now to the to that characters. When did you decide and why? Did you decide that you were the right person to control that character and to kind of guide her path and that character and that world's path into the future?
Well, my first job after film school, I got hired by Stan Lee to come work and apprentice under him. And after a couple of years of working with Stan, I was looking for a character that I could kind of make my own. And at that point, Dad was sort of resting the IP. It hadn't really been around. Like it hadn't since Marvel stopped publishing it in the early 90s. And so it was a bit dormant. And it was sort of an opportunity to relaunch it, which I did with Dynamite Comics back in 2005. It was an opportunity to launch it for a new generation, and really put my stamp on it. And that generation was my generation. So, just seemed, like I said, she's a bit like my sister. So, like, I have this sort of intrinsic understanding of the heart of the character, and you have to allow characters to grow. You have to find a way to allow each generation to make them their own while still holding true to the kind of core essence of the character.
So let's talk about before we get to the film. Let's talk about that comics phase. You mentioned the Dynamite Entertainment Red Sonja comics. You wrote many of those as well as other people. What was that experience like getting to write the comics and what through that process did you think that helped you learn and discover the get inside the character's head more and prepare you for this point now where the film's about to come out?
Um, Well, what I would say about when we relaunched with Dynamite is that it was a bit like lightning in the bottle because we really didn't know how it was going to do. And I chose Dynamite. There were some other suitors at that point, and the vibe I got from a lot of the comic book companies where it was that they were going to, throw a mediocre artist and a mediocre writer on it and see if it had any juice. And if it did, they'll make a few more. And if it didn't, thanks so much, kid. There you go. And Dynamite, I could tell because they were also launching their larger publishing company. It wasn't really just Red Sonja was, it wasn't just a book for them. It was sort of their enterprise at that point. And I knew Nikki Barucci was going to pull every favor, get every top artist to do a cover. We had Oming and Carrie writing it. We had Mel Ruby doing some really, uh, you know, next level art. And the first book, I think we sold number one, sold over 100,000 copies. It was like the number one indie comic in a decade at that point, since like Spawn. So it just kind of took off. And we just kind of, and there was some, sausage making on the creative side in order to make sure it came out right, but it did. And in terms of the writing, I mean, I've always kind of written, like I said, I sort of apprenticed under Stan. To me, writing comics really wasn't that different than when I was making like films, which I did, ever since a young age. It's just, you sort of storyboard a film before you shoot it. It's kind of the same process. So that all felt very natural. And writing the character and finding the voice is just something I already know, just because the character is very close to me.
So the new film's about to come out. Matilda Lutz is the new Red Sonja. Let's talk about her. What qualities does Matilda have that made you say this is the girl?
So I championed Matilda very early in the process, and we really cast this. I mean, we had auditions, we saw hundreds of girls, like it was women. It was a real process, and very early. I mean, I loved her in Revenge, which is Coralie Ferrig. I'm going to butcher that director's name. She's a wonderful director. She just did The Substance. Um, I liked her previous work, but from the auditions, it was very clear very early on that she was a real actress and that she had this, to me, Sonia is, there's a physicality to the role, obviously. And I think sometimes people get a little focused on that, but there's the real sort of fire in the eyes is what, to me, is the essence of the character is about her heart. She's never the biggest and strongest in any battle she's in. She's the fiercest, and that is what Matilda really brings across. She's got that fight in her, and she sort of proved it over the course of the shoot because it was a hard shoot. We had her in 90-degree heat, we had her in freezing rain, and she was, never a crossword, always ready to go again, like just gave it 110% every moment. And she's tough. And that was sort of proved out. Like the thesis was that she had Red Sonja in her, and the shoot was the proof.
What would you say is the biggest challenge that you faced when developing the film? Because there was a Red Sonja film that was in development like 12, 13 years ago. Robert Rodriguez was attached. Rose
Yeah.
McGowan was supposed to be
Nope.
Red Sonja. That
Nope. Go ahead.
developed that was in development hell for a long time. So was there a challenge in the development of the film? And then when
Yeah.
you're in production, what was the biggest challenge?
So, yes, the film was challenging in development, and Robert, I mean, that was all under the same studio, Robert, and there were like a dozen creative teams that came and went on this project. Now, the fortunate part of that was that by the time we got to shooting this, the script was in a very good sort of matured place. MJ took what was, I think, a pretty well-rounded, matured script, did another couple passes on it, made it her own, and then it was the script was strong by the time we were shooting. Owing in part to the fact that we were in development so long and there were so many sort of ideas and people that were sort of contributed to the evolution of the project. Um, so yeah, it was a challenge to get the cameras rolling. When the cameras were finally rolling, it was I definitely had to kind of pinch myself a little bit. In terms of the challenge of production itself, we sort of punching above our weight class. I mean, we didn't have Marvel money to make this movie. And what you have to do with anything like that is lean into it. We have a lot more practical effects. We have a lot more makeup effects. It's not CGI soup from one side to the other. It was all stuff that we did. And I think in a lot of ways, especially given the world and kind of, like I said, the kind of gritty nature of the Hyborian age, I actually think that all plays to our advantage.
Were there any pleasant surprises that you discovered when you're making the film? Something you thought might be difficult thing to film or whatever, and it ended up being a pleasant surprise. Like, oh, we didn't expect this. This is great.
There was a pleasant surprise on the first day of shooting. We were in this old growth forest on the Romanian border. It was, trees hadn't been touched in 500 years, and there was like a mist, natural mist over it. I mean, I think I was pleasantly surprised because I didn't really have a feel for Bulgaria. I didn't know much about the place, that you could really find a lot of really cool, sort of appropriate and like on point locations and spaces there. And I was pleasantly surprised with New Boyana Studios. They've had a lot of fantasy films come through there. So they had a lot of infrastructure that helped us, get off and running on the film.
Before we go, I want to ask you, you touched on the fact that you worked with Stan Lee. He was your mentor for a while. Talk to me about how that relationship started. How did you meet him? How did that mentor and mentee relationship happen? And what one or two things did he tell you or teach you that's stuck with you? And like that, this was great advice from Stan.
So this will all kind of go together. First of all, I'm going to encourage everyone to go on Audible or to their local bookstore and get A Trick of Light, which is the novel that I did with Stan. That was a New York Times bestseller. Go check that out. That launched in 2019, originally in Audible, and then went to hardcover and softcover. Um, but the day I met Stan, I was a film student at NYU, and he was in town for the X-Men premiere. And he let me sit him down, and I was doing my junior year documentary project on him and his career, and he let me sit him down and ask him questions. So there's actually a bunch of things he said to me in the first hour of meeting him when I was peppering him that um, I still sort of are still watchwords today, and two of them that are relevant to this. The first is you mentioned um, how long this film has been in development. And when I was asking him what the keys to success were, he said one of them is perseverance. If you think you've got something, you just mustn't give up. You've got to keep going and hoping that sooner or later someone will recognize what you've done. That's a direct quote. And that is part of the reason that we stuck with this, and really I stuck with this and saw it through. The other thing he said is that it's all about the character. Like he would sort of reduce everything to, even when we were making the book, me and some of my creative partners would go in and we'd have all these ideas and these amazing set pieces and this sort of, all these big fantastical things we wanted to do. And he was just sort of like, yeah, yeah, whatever. Like it's all about the characters. If you care about the characters, and you get the audience invested in the characters, and if they care about them, then you can take the audience anywhere. You can take them to another dimension like Doctor Strange. You can take them to outer space, like he did. But if they don't care about the characters, then it's all sound and fury signifying nothing. It's all spectacle. It doesn't matter how cool your set pieces are if you don't care about the people that are in them. And that I think is, and obviously Sonja is a very character driven story environment, and the movie is that way and the comics are that way. And the way you can keep a character going after all these years and growing after all these years is that people get invested in character, and that you treat that as the most important thing.
What's the one thing you hope audiences take away with them when they see the new film?
um that's a good question. I mean, I'm not going to say it doesn't have a message, because it does, but we're not trying to preach at people. We're just trying to tell a good story. And I find that if you tell a good story, people will sort of find the meaning in it. I think perseverance, I mean, this is Why don't we stick with that? Because that's something that in the story, Sonja has a lot of. You know, she she does what she knows is right, whether it's hard or not. She makes the hard choices. It's a hard world. And that, people I think today are a little too easy on themselves. They let themselves get away with taking the easy way out. And that's not something Sonja would ever do. So hopefully that'll be what people take away.
Well, you can see Sonia make those hard choices in the film Red Sonja, opening in theaters August 15th and available to stream on digital platforms starting August 29th. Luke, thanks so much for chatting with us today on Cherry the Geek TV.